Good evening, I'm Norman Robinson and welcome to Affordable Housing Matters. Tonight we will take you to the Lower Ninth Ward and get a detailed look at what lower9.org is doing to rebuild houses. After that we will speak with Mr. Fred Johnson and he will tell us about some major events coming up this year with the Neighborhood Development Foundation. Finally, we will discuss what Fnbc Bank is doing to promote the development of affordable housing. Valuable information coming up right after this.
My life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic. 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.
New Orleans can be so proud of all that has been done in the decades since Hurricane Katrina pounded the region, rebuilding, restoring, and renewing. But even 10 years of hard work has not been enough to finish the task. Janet Gross takes us to one organization in the Lower Ninth Ward that still works every day to bring people home.
The sounds of deconstruction and reconstruction are heard every day in the Lower Ninth Ward as people still struggle to get back home.
Our population return's only 36%, significantly behind the city numbers overall. So, yeah, there's a lot of recovering to do here. You know, they say that disasters don't discriminate, and that may very well be true, but recoveries do, and we're experiencing that firsthand.
Laura Paul came right after the storm to help. She's been here ever since. She and so many other volunteers saw the gigantic recovery task ahead and wanted to be a part of it. Lower9.org was formed with the commitment to bring people home, to the homes that in many cases had been in the family for generations.
We were a low-wealth black community, almost 100%, 98.1% African American. Over 60% of the population lived below the AMI, the average mean income of the country. But we had one of the highest rates of African American home ownership in the nation here. And those people, if they don't get back into homes like this one, if they're not able to repopulate their own community and their own neighborhood, they'll never be homeowners again.
Year after year, volunteers still show up.
Because I wanted to volunteer somewhere, and I heard about Katrina, and I wanted to be helpful.
It is still amazing every day to get up and go to work with these people and see what they do. I don't know if it surprises me anymore. I guess it surprises me that people are still coming, that people still care enough, and that there's still so much work to be done. That's the most astonishing thing, really.
So spoke to different people about the project and everyone was like, why is it still broken there? It's so long ago. And then I came here and I saw all the ruins and it's really sad actually.
But this helps make it better, little by little. Lower9.org has completely rebuilt more than 80 homes and has done renovations and repairs on more than 200 others.
Before I came to this area, I said, what do these people live there for? But now, after I've been here, this is their home. This is their home. This is where they grew up. And yeah, it's very important for them to be here.
Lower9.org supplies the labor, and there are some donations, but the homeowners have to save up for materials.
We'll do 10 houses a year, but it might take us certain houses a couple years to actually complete. And, you know, we'll save up some money and we'll do the drywall, and then 6 months, 8 months later, they might have a little money to put the doors in.
It's a long road, but worth it for those who have history here. Many can already see it. Boards replaced by beauty, neighbors moving back, that growing, familiar sense of being home. I'm Janet Gross for Affordable Housing Matters.
Thank you, Janet. Lower9.org administrators say they are always looking for donations and volunteers. They say conservative estimates on finishing the rebuilding in the community, at least another 10 years. Contact them if you would like to be a part of their efforts to bring people home. You can go to lower9.org or call 504-278-1240.
I needed help finding a doctor.
PACE.
I needed help with my medication.
PACE.
I needed help getting around.
The Shirley Landry Benson PACE Center is a place that helps seniors remain in their homes, providing the care they need. If you or a family member are over 55 years old, you may be eligible for benefits offered by PACE. For more information, contact us at 504-835-0006. PACE, caring for those who cared for us.
For over 25 years, NDF has provided knowledge, education, and advocacy that makes owning and maintaining a home affordable. Here to tell me how they do that, a returning guest to Affordable Housing Matters, Mr. Fred Johnson. Also with us is Ed Marshall of First NBC Bank to tell us how the two are working together to help people realize their dreams of owning a home. Gentlemen, good evening, and thanks for being here.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It's always a great conversation because we learn a lot, and we also get inspired to know that there's an organization out there helping people to acquire what's called the American Dream.
Yes, it is.
And
yes.
You're coming up on a big occasion.
30 years, 21 years of raising money for the outfit, and 30 years of actually doing the work, and my, how the time go by when you're having fun. But it's been an honor and a pleasure, and if God would broach me and say, Fred, I want you to go back and start this all over again, I would pleasurably say, yes, I will, because it's just been a remarkable task to create something out of election data, election research, and then it's all information and theory and data, and then we decide to say, well, what's missing? 70% of the people rent, 30% of people own, 17,000 plus individuals was paying rents that were equivalent to mortgages. You had a ton of real estate, you had a ton of real estate money, you had a ton of real estate brokers and agents, but you had this 70% of the people who were stuck over here that thought, felt, and believed that without 20% down, they could not otherwise make this step. So the guy, Tim Will, stepped up and said, listen, why don't we start a home buyer training course? Everybody looked at him and said, well, what is that? I said, look at the data. We need a vehicle or a tool that's gonna reach to these people, educate them, counsel them, advocate for them, and direct them on how to get money, not house, how to get money. And at that point, they'll have information and education about how to get money. They will also have information and education on how to go out and not be ripped off in the process of trying to buy a house.
And of course, FNBC knows about how to get money, and you've been a partner.
We've been a partner for a very long time,
Right.
gosh.
A very long time. The first NBC.
Yeah, since the original
Right.
First NBC, and now the new bite. And that all comes about, it's kind of like TV, Norman, and you and I have been in that a long time. You can't fool the public, you know. And so it's really a part of the bank's mission. You know, people come and go, but at the end of the day, the core people that really want to get involved in decent, affordable housing, like myself, like Ashton Ryan, who's our president of the bank, actually sits on the board
Right.
of NDF. And this good man right here to my right, they had the, I don't know what I'd call it. They made me the chairman this year. Right. So it
they had a lapse in judgment.
They surely did. So I've been sleeping and waking, thinking NDF. But it's a part of my mission because it's a part of my life. When I came here, my family and I, 20-something years ago, one of the things that Ashton Ryan and I talked about, he says, well, what are some of the things that you're passionate about? And I said, decent, affordable housing. Everyone should have a decent, affordable place to live. And then that ties into education, all these things, because unless you have a decent place to live, you can't. A child cannot learn.
Right.
So it all ties together, and that's how I got involved. And Fred and his very menial staff. It's only about 4 people there,
Right.
and since 1986, more than 3,000 homeowners, and you're looking at people who have very modest incomes, but these guys go in, teach them how to clean up their credit, and then not only that, teach them how to go about looking for the house.
Right.
But then you don't just say, "Okay, see ya." Go back and say, "Wait a minute, let's help you know this," because these are people who've never had to change a light bulb. It's things that we so often take for granted, and they go through the steps.
Right.
And what's really neat is that when Fred was brought in, well, he's been there when we came. Fred was elevated to CEO, what, 6 years ago?
Yeah, 6 years ago.
And Fred said, "I will do that job only if I'm still allowed to teach training classes."
Interview and train.
Because that's where the rubber meets the road.
That's where it be, and you can take it from there. Because he's
Well,
a man that talks to these people and knows if they really want a house.
Let me just tell you how deep the relationship is with First NBC. And I didn't know Mr. Ryan, but this is back in the Acorn days. And Acorn was rattling the banks, and the banks told Acorn whatever they told them.
I remember.
And a lady named Joy Mogul called me. I didn't even really know who she was. And she said, "Listen, I need to know what you need to make your shop run." I said, "I need sensitive underwriting and below market interest rates." So she called me back and she said, "Listen, we're going to give you $500,000, and the rates was good, the underwriting was good." So we went through $500,000 4 times, and about the 4th $500,000, I get a call and said, "Mr. Ryan has instructed us that any of your deals that come, and it looks like they're going to deny them, send them to him. And then on a certain day, his secretary is going to call you, and he want to go through each one of these files with you." So we set this up, and he called me and he says, "Fred, I want to talk to you about Willie Henry, Frank Jones, Raymond Brown." And we go through them. He said, "Do 1, 2, A, B, 3, 4, 5, 6. They all approved. And none of these files defaulted. So we called it the second look. That was in the first NBC. So that was early on. And you know, to his credit, to his face and behind his back, he has been a champion with respects to the low to moderate income buyers.
So you're talking about a relationship that has been forged between the NDF
right.
And First NBC to
right.
undergird
right.
Exactly.
people who are challenged when it comes to finding affordable housing.
So no, let me tell you what we found out in that initial piece that he just talked about. A lot of times people just look at a credit score and say, denied, but you've got to wait a minute. This person's been working all these years, never missed a payment on the rent or whatever, and all of a sudden something happens in that family. Right. But no one was taking the time to go back and see what happened.
Take those factors into consideration.
And then you take those factors into consideration. This person had a wife had an operation, and now she's able to go back to work, but she's been out of work for 6 months. That's why it works the way it works, because we found out what happened. People don't just stop paying. I do not believe that basic human beings don't want to pay their bills.
Right.
There's usually something that happens for people who have been the kind of people who take care of their business, like my mama used to say. And if you take care of your business, and I remember her saying one time, she said, my brother had a problem. She said, "You need to go to those people and tell them what's going on with you." And after he did, they rearranged his payments, whatever, and it went from there.
And Norman, the interesting thing is that in my soon-to-be 30 years of pulling credit reports, I have a saying to the customer that, listen, these 9 numbers, which is your Social Security number, is your DNA on the financial side. You have a medical DNA, you have a financial DNA. You can change the name, change the county, change the municipality, but you're not going to change the Social Security number. But one of the interesting things that I've seen is that some of the people who make the least money paid their bills far much better than the people who made the most money. And that was because what those less income clients understood was that, listen, this is all I have.
Right.
And all I have is my credit. And now it's even worse because a refrigerator back then might have been $300. A refrigerator today could be $3,000.
Yes.
And who has $3,000 to walk in and just put $3,000 down and walk out with a paid in full, they're going to need some credit. And of course, the credit is going to be based on how you've paid other people and how high the scores are, so forth and so on. But the essence of what I've come to love and appreciate about the work NDF does is that we are making a hardcore drive at poverty. A hardcore drive at poverty, because in America, you can look around, America, assets in America has and still is passed on through real estate. And we have this conversation about, well, housing is too expensive. Well, I'm born and reared in New Orleans, and never in my life have we saw rents at the rate that they are. People are paying $11, $8, $9, $11, $12, $1,500. And that's something that they can't pass on because they're not accumulating any assets in that. So people are understanding that you're a parent, you have 2 children, single or married. It's your responsibility to create an asset to pass on to that child. If each generation is to exceed that which you come from, it's your responsibility as a parent to make sure that your children do better than you.
So given the economic climate that we're living in today, how do you make this work, Ed?
Well, one thing I want to add to that, and we'll talk about making that work, but when you're genuine about what you're doing, and we need to say this because NDF has other banks on board as well.
Right. Of course.
And the reason that was, First Fnbc didn't come in and say, hey, Fred, we're going to do this, but we got to be this great, wonderful bank.
The only bank, no.
He said, let's get other banks involved.
Right.
Let's get other people involved. And then there were some, people who were already working with NDF.
Liberty Bank.
Liberty Bank
Alden
was
McDonald
Alden has been a superior person.
A board member, provided us with space for many, many, many years. Right.
So in essence, you're talking about this is how it works.
This is how it works. You got to get collaboration. You got to get these other banks. And as a result, we have, I think, 3 or 4 people on our board.
Yeah, Capital One, Liberty Bank, First NBC Bank,
Regions,
Whitney, Regions. Some of the main players in the bank. The problem we have today is that for some strange reason, some information has gotten in the water to funders that says, outside the banks that says, well, housing is not as important anymore. And as Ed mentioned earlier, where you wake up in the morning starts off the temperament and the behavior of that individual, of how you look at yourself and how you look at other people.
That's a fact.
So how anybody could arrive at that conclusion that housing is essential to the growth and the development and the spirituality of how people treat themselves and how they treat others. So the fight we have today, we're producing the work, but we scrapping for money because they keep moving the money from bucket A to bucket B to bucket C, and some strange reason they skip over housing. How could you have a quality, wholesome community and you not have quality, wholesome housing?
Right.
I would love to debate those folks who say to the money givers and the money loaners why housing is not essential, right? Because my first question would be to them, where do you live?
Right.
So that is the challenge now, especially since you're talking about one of your major fundraising efforts. That is your house party and the birthday bash.
Birthday bash and the house party. Now, house party is coming up on March 19th.
Right.
And it's the true gut fundraiser for NDF to have seed money to do what it does to help train and educate people. And it's going to be at the First Fnbc Bank main office at 210 Barone Street. Ashton Ryan, we mentioned earlier, is giving us carte blanche to open the big, lobby, which they don't they don't just do this for everybody, because you get to the point where everybody, but it's one of those things where people expect for it to be there. You've always been there. You've been there, and we'll be back again as.
Yeah, I was there from the time I had hair, when I used to have hair.
And before mine was receding.
Yeah, and before mine was great.
But it's a great opportunity for people in the general public who believe in housing to meet homeowners, first of all. And these people come and say, let me tell you how NDF helped change my life.
Well, Norman, in addition to that, what gets skipped over the soon to be 30 years, is the economic side of this. We have pumped millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars back into this economy. When you look at the purchasing of a house, the taxes, the electricity grid, the water bill, the furnishings, the appliances, the renovations, and it also helps with a better quality neighborhood because people who own have a stake.
No question about it. Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Look forward to seeing you on the 19th.
19th, right.
And it's always a pleasure.
And the pleasure's always ours.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you much.
You're welcome. When we come back, we will meet the director of First NBC Bank's Community Development Corporation. Don't go far.
I just had to come back one last time. You leave home, you move on, and you do the best you can. I got lost in this old world and forgot who I am.
Welcome back. We are now joined by Mr. Jonah Dowling, Director of First NBC Bank Community Development Corporations. Mr. Dowling, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Norman.
Glad to have you here. What exactly do you do at the CDC?
Well, so it's a good question. The First NBC CDC works a lot with local nonprofit organizations to develop affordable housing. And what we do is we like to partner with local nonprofits and help them sort of build capacity so that we can do both affordable first-time homebuyer housing as well as affordable rental housing.
So you're talking about develop a intensified kind of approach to affordable housing?
Well, that's been the approach we've had after post-Katrina. We've really, obviously there was a huge need for housing across the metro area, really across South Louisiana. But we focused first in New Orleans, and originally we had wanted to do first-time homebuyer housing, single-family housing, but we found it was very difficult with increased insurance rates and just getting people qualified that we sort of ended up looking at a rental market, a rental housing as our model, but we wanted to stick to building housing that was sort of densifying the community and not doing multifamily, large, dense developments. So we did single-family housing, although many of them are rental.
What's the advantage of going that route?
Well, the advantage right after the storm was that, whether it's good or bad, a lot of the affordable housing dollars were weighted more towards the rental side through the low-income housing tax credit program than for first-time home buyers. So we ended up utilizing the low-income housing tax program, their mixed income approach, and we were able to build a number of single-family houses. But the intent is to, once we finish the compliance period, sell those houses to the residents at a below-market rate. So we ultimately are accomplishing our goal of creating home ownership.
So you sort of had to restructure your approach.
We did.
And that is because of the cost?
The cost, and I think that the demand, we had a lot of vacant lots, and we wanted to build a lot of housing, but it was very unlikely that we were going to be able to get that many homeowners that were going to be able to qualify and get in there quickly. So we realized that if we wanted to make an impact quickly, then we needed to really look at the rental market as a way of filling these houses, with the option as we move on to ultimately make these renters buyers.
What about subsidies?
Well, so the subsidy that we used for the rental program was a combination of different funding sources. The biggest of which is the low-income housing tax credit program, and that is acquiring tax credits through the state and then selling them to investors to create equity to build the houses. We also received community development block grants from the state, as well as some dollars from the city. So we were able to layer those subsidies and make the project work. as opposed to home ownership, which really only has a handful of options, whether it's home funds or community development block grant funds. But again, you need to find qualified buyers, and that can sometimes be a long process.
So now, are we talking about, since you've seen a shift in the dynamics of affordable housing? So are we talking about moving people away from home ownership initially to affordable rentals, and then hopefully at some point easing them into first-time home ownership?
That was, yes, that's sort of been our approach because of just the critical mass after the storm, and we wanted to get houses built and really build clean, decent, affordable housing and get infill housing in for these neighborhoods that had a lot of vacant lots. But I think that as we move forward, our focus is going to be more on the home ownership piece of that. But I think just after the storm, in order to get the numbers we wanted to do and build, we built approximately 500 units after the storm. The rental market was an easier way to actually fund the construction and get them built. And then as we go forward, we'll try to move these homeowners into the houses.
What areas are you looking at most critically for this kind of housing assistance?
Well, we did a lot of stuff in Central City, in New Orleans. We've done stuff on the West Bank. We've done stuff in Gentilly. Right now, actually, we've done a home ownership program in Pontchartrain Park. We partnered with the Pontchartrain Park Community Development Corporation and helped them build 34 houses. They've got 18 home buyers that have moved into houses, and the project's been going well. But we are having, I won't say difficulty, but it's a challenge to find people who qualify and have the subsidy in place to make the numbers work.
What is the challenge? You say you're having difficulty finding people who qualify. What list some of the challenges? Well,
I think the biggest challenge is that post-Katrina, there was a large amount of subsidy, quite frankly, that came into the city. And a lot of different nonprofits popped up and focused on specific neighborhoods in many cases to build housing, but the construction cost also went up. So it costs about $100 a square foot to build a house. So if you want to build a 1,400 square foot house, you're looking at $140,000 for construction. Cost of acquisition, soft cost, you're probably $165,000 to $185,000 in to build the house. And many of these buyers, because the area median income has not really changed very much, most of these buyers will qualify for probably about maybe $120,000 mortgage. So you've got to fill that gap. After the storm, there was a lot of subsidy in place to help fill that gap. Now that subsidy, quite frankly, has dried up, and you have to do more with less. And so we've got to really look at how we can fill that gap, and what are the other sources, and do we look at maybe trying to create tax credits or some sort of program that will generate equity from the outside to help fill that gap.
So how do you do that, especially in a state like Louisiana, which is experiencing a very onerous, to say the least, budget situation?
Well, it's going to be difficult, as you know, and I think that when we talk about the low-income housing tax credit program, that's a federal program. It's actually written right into the IRS code, and those credits are given to each state based on population and then allocated through a competitive process. It's all done for rental. And so you see, again, that the subsidies and the dollars are sort of weighted towards the rental side. And what I love to see one day is that there be some program set up for home ownership that kind of mirrors in some way the low-income housing tax credit program or the historic tax credit program, and try to get buyers in there. And that would be done through the federal government. And then it would be just allocated to the state. And so it wouldn't be something that necessarily impacted the state's budget.
As it is now, that seems to contradict the American motto of home ownership is the American dream.
Well, that's correct. It's getting harder and harder. And part of it is I've had conversations with nonprofits who do first-time home buyer. And I think a lot of people have a perception of what the home buyer is for affordable housing. But I talked to one person who said that they had a couple. The wife was a school teacher, the husband was a custodian, and they made too much income to qualify for federal program, for federal dollars, to become first-time home buyers. I don't think many of us would consider a school teacher and a custodian to be wealthy or too rich, and I think the problem is there's a disconnect between working class, who we all believe should have an opportunity to have the American dream and own a house, and where the dollars are actually going. And so there's a little bit of disconnect. I think part of it is the construction costs and things have gone up, and yet incomes necessarily haven't. And so that gap is getting greater and greater, and it's getting more and more difficult to find ways to fill that gap and get people into houses.
Now, how does this connect or relate to the significance of having the involvement of minority contractors?
I don't, that's a good question. I think that for us, we actually employ we make a point of trying to give job opportunities to everybody, and particularly small business owners. And there are a lot of small business owners, particularly in the residential construction world, who are minorities. So for us, it's an easy one to meet those goals that we have for ourselves. Obviously, when you get bigger commercial jobs, that's where you see a lot of the conversation that we see in the news about DBE. Really talks about bigger jobs. But for what we're doing small scale, we've always employed a great deal of minority contractors, and it's easy, and because there's a lot of them available to us. But certainly on the bigger jobs, when you talk about having to be bonded and stuff, and getting to that next level, that's a real challenge. Unfortunately, it's not a world I necessarily operate too much in, because we do more, smaller scale development.
But the world you do operate in, you're having success with.
We have, yes.
Involving minority contractors.
We have. When we did the Pontchartrain Park project, for example, we used 2 separate general contractors, and both contractors were minority contractors, and many of their subcontractors were minority contractors. So it was easy, and something that makes us feel good. We want to do that, obviously, at the CDC, is to give as many opportunities to people as possible.
Well, thank you. It's been an interesting conversation.
Well, thank you.
Pleasure having you here.
Absolutely. Thanks.
We would like to thank Mr. Dowling and all of our guests on tonight's show. For more information on our guests on this show and others, please visit WLAE.com and click on the Affordable Housing Matters link. There you can get in contact with every guest we've had on our program. Also, don't forget to tell us what you want to see on Affordable Housing Matters by emailing us at ahm@WLAE.com. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Norman Robinson. Have a good night.